Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
Every morning before sunrise, Mason ran the same 5-mile loop through the wooded trails behind his apartment complex. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the past 2 years, nothing unusual had ever happened. He liked the stillness before the world woke up. That's why he noticed when it changed. It began on a Thursday in early October. The weather had just started to shift. Crisp air bit at his skin, and the darkness lasted longer. About a mile into the run, Mason saw someone ahead of him. Not unusual, other early risers used the trails, but this person was different. They weren't moving, just standing in the middle of the path facing away from him. Dressed in a dark hoodie and gray sweatpants. No flashlight, no reflective gear, nothing. Mason slowed as he approached, clearing his throat and saying, "Morning." The figure didn't respond or move. He jogged past, glancing over his shoulder. Nothing. The person hadn't turned around. They were still facing the same way, perfectly still. He thought about reporting it to park security, but there wasn't much to report. Just weird. The next morning, the figure was there again, in the same spot, again, facing away, again, not moving. Mason stopped for a moment, staring. This time, he noticed something off. The person's hands hung unnaturally low, like the arms were too long. He thought maybe it was just a trick of the light or the bulkiness of the hoodie. Trying to ignore the growing unease in his gut, he picked up his pace and ran the rest of the loop without looking back. The third morning, the figure had moved. It now stood at the half-mile mark, closer to the trailhead, and Mason didn't see it until his flashlight beam caught the reflective glint of 2 eyes staring directly at him. It was still, but no longer turned away. It faced him, head tilted just slightly to the side. Mason froze, the beam trembling in his hand. He called out again. No answer. But this time, the head tilted further, almost unnaturally far, like a puppet with loosened strings. And then it smiled, a wide, expressionless grin that didn't reach the eyes. He ran, faster than he ever had, all the way home. He skipped running the next day, then the next. By Sunday, he convinced himself it was just a prank, someone trying to scare people for fun. That night, he went to bed determined to take back his morning routine. On Monday, Mason left the apartment at 5:30 a.m., but something was wrong. As he reached the edge of the wooded path, he saw footprints, deep impressions in the damp soil, bare feet, no shoes, just long, thin footprints leading into the woods. He told himself to turn around, go back, but instead, he followed them. The trail was dead silent. No owls, no wind, no rustling leaves, just the sound of his own breathing. The footprints veered off the path and into the thick woods. He followed, moving slower now. His flashlight flickered once, then again. That's when he saw them. Multiple figures now, not one, at least 3 standing between the trees, almost camouflaged in the darkness. Their faces were pale, stretched with blank eyes and that same grotesque smile. They didn't move, but something behind Mason did. The crunch of a twig, he spun around and came face to face with one of them, inches away. No sound, no warning. Its hand reached toward him, too long, fingers spider-like, black dirt caked beneath the nails. Mason stumbled back, flashlight dropping to the ground. In the flickering beam, he saw them all stepping forward. He ran. Branches tore at his arms and face, the path impossible to find again. But somehow, he made it out. He burst from the woods into the empty parking lot, panting and bloodied. When he looked back, nothing, just the woods. Mason never ran again. He moved out of the complex 2 weeks later. Told his friends it was work-related. But sometimes, late at night, he still hears footsteps outside his new apartment window. Slow, barefoot. And when he wakes up in the morning, there are muddy prints just beneath the glass, facing in.
Story number 2.
Every evening around 7 p.m., Natalie went jogging in her quiet suburban neighborhood. The route she preferred wound through a small nature trail tucked between 2 residential blocks. It was rarely crowded, just her, the trees, and the occasional squirrel. It gave her a sense of peace, a quiet routine she never questioned. Not until mid-November. The first odd thing was the sound. About halfway through the trail, she heard a second set of footsteps behind her. Not close, but definitely there. She slowed, pretending to check her smartwatch, and suddenly glanced back. Nothing. No one. She resumed running, but the moment she picked up speed, so did the echo behind her. When she stopped again, silence. only the wind in the branches. It unsettled her, but she convinced herself it was probably just the sound bouncing off the trees. Audio illusions. She told herself that every night for the rest of the week. By the next Monday, the footsteps weren't just behind her. She began to hear breathing. Heavy, raspy, like someone struggling to inhale through a wet cloth. It never got closer, just stayed a consistent distance behind her, as if pacing her. That night, she went home and told her roommate. They laughed it off, told her she was just spooked from too many true crime podcasts. But Natalie knew something was wrong. She started carrying pepper spray, changed her route slightly, and began jogging earlier while hoping to avoid whoever was out there. Then came the man. 2 weeks into the strange sounds, Natalie saw him standing at the edge of the woods as she exited the trail. He wasn't walking or jogging, just standing, arms loose at his sides, face in shadow, backlit by the streetlight. He didn't move when she passed, didn't wave, speak, or even turn his head. Natalie bolted across the street and ran the last 2 blocks home. She told herself she wouldn't go back. She swore she'd find a new route. But the next evening, something compelled her to return. Not a sense of bravery, something else. Like she had to. She couldn't explain it. The path was empty at first, cold wind, fallen leaves crunching beneath her sneakers. Then came the breathing, closer this time. She stopped abruptly. The breathing didn't. Spinning around, she aimed her flashlight toward the trail behind her. Still nothing. But when she turned back around, he was standing in front of her. The man, just a few feet ahead, blocking the path. His eyes were wrong, too wide, too sunken. His mouth hung open in a twisted O, yet no sound came out. He tilted his head, and Natalie saw that something black was leaking from his ear, thick and slow. She turned to run, but the trail had changed. It wasn't the same path anymore. The trees were closer together, the trail darker than it should have been. She ran blindly, turning corners that hadn't been there yesterday, sprinting down stretches of trail that felt wrong, off. Behind her, multiple sets of footsteps now, and that breathing again. But no matter how fast she ran, she couldn't find the exit. Her smartwatch said she had gone over 7 miles in a loop that was only supposed to be 2. Her phone had no signal. The last thing she remembered before everything went black was a hand, cold and brittle like tree bark, closing over her mouth. They found her the next morning, just a few feet from the trail's end, collapsed in the dirt with dried leaves in her mouth and deep scratches along her arms and legs. Her shoes were missing. Her smartwatch was gone. She wouldn't speak, not at first. When she finally did, she kept whispering the same thing over and over. The path doesn't end, not for them. She never ran again, never walked alone again, and sometimes, even in daylight, she still swears she hears footsteps behind her.
Story number 3.
Darren was a night runner. Not because he preferred it, but because his job at the hospital kept him working late shifts. So, around midnight, after the streets had quieted and most people were asleep, he'd throw on his hoodie and headphones and jog a few laps around the deserted neighborhood park. It was usually dead silent. The kind of silence that presses in on you, broken only by the distant buzz of streetlights or the rhythmic thump of his shoes on pavement. But one night in late September, something changed. About 15 minutes into his run, as he was rounding the far edge of the park near the wooded lot, his music abruptly cut off. No static, no warning, just silence. Thinking it was a Bluetooth glitch, he stopped to fix it. That's when he heard the whisper. It wasn't words at first, more like a breath right by his ear. He yanked the earbuds out and spun around, expecting to see someone behind him. The trail was empty. His breath puffed visibly in the cool air, but he saw no one. He took a few cautious steps forward when he noticed something else. There was a figure standing just beyond the trail in the trees. Pale, motionless, watching. It was far enough away that he couldn't make out the face, but close enough to know that it was definitely human-shaped. The worst part? It was completely still. Not swaying, not adjusting, just frozen like a cutout, as if it had been waiting. Darren backed away slowly, never taking his eyes off it. The figure didn't move. He didn't run that night. The next evening, against better judgment, he went back. Nothing strange for the first 10 minutes. The music played fine, no weird sounds. He started to think maybe he had imagined it. But as he passed the wooded lot again, his music stopped. Same exact way as before. And this time the figure was closer. He could see more detail now. The skin was pale, yes, but not normal pale. It looked transparent, almost damp, like stretched plastic. The eyes were all wrong. Too large, too round, bulging like they were pressed against glass from the inside. Then it took a step forward. Darren turned and ran full sprint back toward the park's entrance. The pounding of his feet was joined by a second set. It was following him, but the steps weren't quite right. Not even. More like the frantic scrambling of something that didn't know how to run properly. He didn't look back. When he reached the edge of the park, the footsteps stopped. He turned around. Nothing. No one there. But when he got home, he noticed something strange on his hoodie. A smear of blackish, sticky residue across his shoulder, like a handprint. He hadn't fallen, hadn't brushed against anything. He scrubbed it off, convinced himself it was tree sap. The next night, he didn't go jogging, but around midnight, he heard footsteps on the gravel outside his apartment building. Slow, deliberate. He peeked out his blinds. Standing beneath the streetlight was the same figure. This time it smiled. Its mouth was far too wide. Darren moved out of town a week later. No warning, no forwarding address. No one's heard from him since. But every so often, joggers in that same park report their music suddenly cutting out. And when they stop to fix it, they swear they hear a whisper behind them, just low enough to be mistaken for the wind, until it says their name.
Story number 4.
Carla had always been a creature of habit. She jogged the same loop every morning before sunrise, a quiet, paved path that circled the old reservoir at the edge of town. It was surrounded by thick trees on all sides, and fog always clung low to the water, peaceful, eerie, and completely hers. One morning, she noticed a new trail. It branched off from the main path just before the old maintenance shed, narrow and overgrown like it hadn't been used in years. But there were fresh footprints in the dirt, bare feet. She paused, heart picking up slightly. Something about the trail pulled at her, like it was waiting to be noticed. The next day, the trail was wider. She didn't remember it being that clear. The grass was trampled now, and the soil looked recently disturbed, as if someone had walked it repeatedly overnight. Still, she stuck to her loop. But the entire jog, she had the sensation of being watched. Not followed, watched, like something just out of sight was staring from behind the trees. By the fourth morning, she couldn't help herself. She turned down the path. It twisted deeper into the woods than she expected. No birdsong, no breeze, just silence. Her feet crunched over twigs and patches of moss. The trees leaned in above her, blocking out the sky. She should have turned back, but she kept going. After a few minutes, she started to hear something faint. Footsteps. Behind her. She stopped. So did they. She turned. Nothing. Just the trail winding back behind her, empty and still. But when she looked down, she saw something she hadn't expected. Her own footprints and a second pair, also bare. But they weren't behind hers. They were in front. The prints had been leading her in, deeper. Carla backed up slowly, heart thudding in her chest. Then she heard it, a soft, high giggle, not a child's laugh, too sharp, too dry, like it was echoing through bone. She turned and ran. But the trail had changed. It wasn't the path she'd come down anymore. The turns were unfamiliar, the trees denser. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't hear her own footsteps anymore, only someone else's, close and wet, like bare feet slapping against stone. Then the whispers started. They weren't words at first, just nonsense syllables, breathy and low. But as she ran, they grew clearer, over and over. She came down. She stays down. She stumbled into a clearing, sudden, unnatural. In the center stood a single figure, unmoving, facing away. It was pale, with skin stretched tight over two thin limbs. Carla tried to stop herself, but her legs didn't obey. She walked forward as if yanked by invisible strings. The figure turned. Its face was wrong. No features, just a wide, gaping mouth where its entire face should have been. Inside, she saw movement, arms, legs, eyes. Like it was full of others who had walked the path before her. She screamed. The next thing she knew, she was waking up at the edge of the reservoir, lying in the dew-wet grass as the sun rose. Her shoes were gone. Her legs were muddy, scratched, and bruised. Her smartwatch said she'd been gone 4 hours. She never found the path again. Every morning after that, she looked for it, desperate to prove it was real. But it was gone, hidden again. Sometimes, though, when the fog is thick enough, Carla swears she sees footprints in the dirt, not hers, bare, leading off the path, waiting for someone else to follow.